Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 49 of the Squad Room. I'm your host, Garrett Tesla. I'm an 11-year veteran of a sheriff's department in Southern California, and I'm the host of this project. If this is your first time listening, this is going to be a great one. We have Greg Amundson back on the show. He was our first guest ever, and he's back again with his new book, Firebreather Fitness. If this is your first time, the Squad Room is about developing, optimizing, and maintaining the health and wellness of law enforcement officers around the world, starting, frankly, with myself. Health and wellness mean a lot of things to me, and I try to explore it all here. How can we maintain and improve our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, our mindfulness, and even our leadership? The show is about my journey as a law enforcement officer, trying to get better by evaluating my own life constantly and by trying to reach out to experts to see what I can learn from them. I talk to other cops, doctors, military leaders, even meditation experts, anyone who can be a force multiplier in my own fitness. So this is episode 49, and Greg is on, and I normally plug Audible, my Audible subscription, which if you enjoy audiobooks and you like using those on duty or on your commute to and from work and you don't already have Audible, you can go to audibletrial.com/the squad room, all one word, to get a free 30-day trial and a free ebook of your choice, and you can try it out for free. It supports the show immensely, and it's no cost to you, but if you, of course, can sign up from there. But I like audiobooks. They're a great way to pass the time when you just can't find a podcast, which hopefully you've already listened to all 48 others of these before you get an audiobook. But if you need an audiobook or you're sick of hearing my voice, I get it. You can go to audibletrial.com/the squadron for the free book. Now, I usually recommend a audiobook to go with those episodes, but I can't today because I have to recommend a hard copy book, which is Greg's book, Firebreather Fitness. Greg, for those of you who don't know or who maybe don't CrossFit, and hopefully a whole handful of you didn't just turn this off or hit pause when I said the C word of CrossFit, Greg is got a lot to add to the discussion about law enforcement. He was a deputy with the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Department. He was on their SWAT team. He eventually transitioned to the Drug Enforcement Agency and was on what's called the BEST team, which is essentially the Border Patrol's version of a SWAT team. He was the DEA liaison to that. He spent a lot of time working on the border, doing all sorts of high-risk stuff, jumping out of helicopters, doing all the kind of things that cops want to do, at least a certain kind of cop. So Greg did all that. He transitioned out of law enforcement. We talk about that here. Greg's nickname is the original Firebreather, and he got that after going into the original CrossFit gym back in the day. He's one of the very first people to ever start doing CrossFit at the original gym with Coach Glassman running a small shed of a workout space. And I got to know Greg first through YouTube. When I got into CrossFit, I'm trying to figure out how to do some of these movements, and Greg's videos were all over the place on movement standards and some of his workouts. And the dude is insane. He was a beast back then, and he still is. So Greg's got a new book. We talk about a little bit. What I liked about the book was that it wasn't just an emphasis on physical fitness, although that's obviously important, but he really emphasizes the mind and spirit, and about a third of the book is in each category: physical, mind, and spirit. It's not all just physical fitness, though there's lots of good tips in there and there's some good workouts. To follow Greg, his Instagram his personal one is Gregory Amundson, and that's the same as his website, GregoryAmundson.com. Amundson is AMUNDSON. You can also follow him at CrossFit Amundson. That's his box up in Santa Cruz. And that stuff's more kind of CrossFit and gym-specific related stuff. But Gregory Amundson is his Instagram for his bigger goals, bigger projects. We had a great conversation. Unfortunately, we had not as nearly as much time as I wanted. I had a whole bunch of questions I never even got to. But he makes some fantastic points. We talk about transitions. We talk about fear of moving on, whether that's joining the force or leaving the force or promoting. And we talk about the importance of positive self-talk, something that's for us as cops doesn't come naturally. So really had a great time with him. He, as I tell him during the show, is a mentor to me and is very, very important to me. And he's also probably the most requested guest that I get to have back on. So it's cool to have him back, and we'll have him back again some other time. So you can always check in with me. Our web address is thesquadroom.net. Email is Garrett. That's 2 R's, 2 T's at thesquadroom.net. If you want to shoot me an email, love to hear from people all over the world, or over 100 countries at this point. And we got some fantastic listeners all over the globe. And so, without further ado, here is our interview with Greg Amundson. Greg Amundson, welcome back to the show, man. It's such a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you, my friend. I have been looking forward to being back on the show with you ever since our first podcast together. So it's great to be back.
Yeah, you were my the first guest on the show, episode 3. You're the first guest I ever traveled to go see. And not to pump you up too much before we even get started, but you're also by far the most requested guest I get to have back on the show.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have you back. I know we got only a little bit of time, so I'm going to jam through some stuff because I also want to get to some questions from some listeners. So you've got a new book, Firebreather Fitness, that you poured your heart and soul into. And it's been out for a couple weeks, right, at this point?
Yeah, it came out on January 5th.
Okay, and I'm holding my copy here, pre-ordered. What I noticed about this book, and what I think a lot of people are going to pick up on, is that only about a third of the book is about the physical stuff of your fitness. The other parts really emphasize mind and spirit. And you talk in the book a lot about the importance of finding your why when you're doing these things. And the first question I have is, law enforcement, we have a mission. We know what our mission is, sometimes on a daily basis, and then overall, the overarching mission of the profession. Is it important for a law enforcement officer to still really whittle down or screw down on what their why is?
It's absolutely vital, brother. It really is. And what I'd love to do is actually share a story with you from the Bible that I think puts things into perspective about how important a life purpose is. If we look to the Bible, one of the early recorded stories of the life of Jesus is when he is in the synagogue. And this is the first time that he publicly preaches and ministers. He's in the synagogue and he reads from the book of Isaiah. And he tells everyone in the synagogue, "This is why I've come. This is the purpose of my life." And he lays it out before everyone. And everyone is floored. Everyone's shocked. And this is one of the first times in recorded history that we understand and we see the power of not just having a job, not just having a career or a profession, but of someone actually professing and saying, "This is the reason for my very life. This is the reason I was born. This is my purpose in life." And then he goes on throughout the Bible to accomplish that very purpose. So what we see is that we might be in a profession, we might have a career, we might be doing something that we love, yet we still feel in our heart, in our mind, that there's something missing, and that something missing is oftentimes more that we're desirous of. We have a desire to fulfill something greater that we might not even be able to articulate or fully understand. And that feeling is God speaking to us, letting us know that there's something greater that he has in store for us. There's something greater that we're designed and that we're born to do. And until we're doing that in some way, that longing will always remain. So as I write in the book, finding that reason why, the why of our life, is just vital. There's this great quote in the book from my friend Kyle Maynard, who told me, "Greg, the stronger the why in your life, the stronger your life will be." Isn't that just beautiful?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you started with the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Department, and then you went to the DEA in San Diego, and then you transitioned out of law enforcement. How has your why evolved over the course of those transitions?
Well, the why it's interesting. The why has really remained the same in essence. And this is very common as we mature and as we move through different archetypes, different chapters, different phases of our life. We just take on a different expression of the same purpose, and we maybe develop a greater understanding of what that purpose is. So part of the purpose has always had that element of protection, of service, of love. That's always been part of the fabric and the makeup of the why and of the purpose. Yet as I gained a better understanding, what I found was that in addition to the protection and the service, what I really loved to do and the direction I really felt God was leading me was into education and inspiration about developing a strong mind, body, and spirit. And when I look at my law enforcement career, even within the sheriff's office, when I was on the SWAT team, when I was in the Army, when I was with DEA, of course, the day-to-day activities were the protection and service element, the investigative element. Yet what I was always looking forward to were those days when I was teaching defensive tactics or when I was teaching a physical fitness class for one of the various departments I was working with. That's really where my heart was. And then on the weekends, I was looking forward to sharing that same message of integrated fitness through teaching at CrossFit seminars and then teaching the CrossFit goal setting course. So the armor that I wore, so to speak, like the expression of it, it was evolving. Yet for a long time, that evolving process was under the umbrella of a law enforcement and military or warrior type archetype. And then as I grew mature, I just found different ways of expressing that. So what we see and what the listener might benefit from understanding is that first, the life purpose and what you actually do might not necessarily be the same thing, or they may merge together over time. Yet it doesn't always start that way.
So, um, the follow up to that, then. So there's a lot of different people that listen to the show, but there are three kind of outliers, I would say, of the listeners. That seems to be a theme. I mean, outside of the kind of the general, law enforcement officer is people who are wanting to enter the profession and are applying and getting prepared for the academy. People who have recently been promoted or are trying to promote, and then the third are retirees. And we actually have a lot of retirees who listen to the show too, and I hear from them. So those are all three big transitions. In your experience now, with the gifts of your hindsight and your own, what advice or what would you say to them that would help them reaffirm or maybe revise their purpose as they move into these new areas of their life?
That's a great question. The first would be a warning to the profession, to everyone who wants to get involved in the profession. And that warning is that we are, as sons and daughters of God, we're greater than anything that we do during our life. Everything that we're doing in our life, every experience of our life is by design in transition. It's a transitory world that we live in. And this is why we're warned in the Bible to seek first the kingdom of God, store up your treasures in heaven. Time and again, Christ warns against the danger and the illusion of trying to attach and keep things the way they are. Things are changing. And the reason I say a warning to the profession is because what we see is that people that associate who they are with what they do, when what they do changes, either due to an injury, due to retirement, their life crumbles. They lose their sense of identity because they identified solely with what they did. So as we move towards our life purpose, that's the beauty of finding something greater within our heart and mind that we can continue to fulfill in new expressive ways for the duration of our life.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's really that. It's just about understanding the nature
Mhm.
of reality
So you're
and that things are changing, and to try to keep things as they are only leads to suffering. So as we experience any transition in life, and this could be transition from one department to another, from one detail within a department to another, transitioning out of the career altogether due to retirement or injury, those transitions are opportunities
Mhm.
for us to reevaluate, for us to grow, for us to perhaps even develop in an area of our life that we may have never thought possible or may have never considered, or more often than not, I find that people were considering it. It was something they, in fact, always wanted to move into and try. They may have just, for a period of time, lacked the courage or the understanding of how to develop into that area. And then life happens, and wow, here's a new opportunity, and life helps propel them in that new direction.
I think that's great advice, and I think anybody who's been on the job any amount of time knows the retired guy that swore up and down that the day of his retirement you'd never see him again, and then he's back a couple weeks later hanging out
Yeah,
or
yeah.
working extra help or volunteering because they're so wrapped up in that, and it's easy. It's so easy for us, I think, when you have the benefit of an echo chamber of being around cops, and cops understand other cops, and there's not many other people that do, to really get yourself wrapped tightly around that axle of being in law enforcement and living your entire identity as as a law enforcement officer. So it sounds like you suggest that your purpose and why might be your motivator for being in law enforcement, but that shouldn't be the why and the purpose. That maybe serving is the why or the purpose. Is that right?
Absolutely. So for example, because even within the career field of law enforcement, think how vast that career field is. That can take on so many expressions. That's something that was really illuminating for me, is that I had an opportunity to serve in so many different capacities that I learned, wow, there's so many people that are called to this profession. Yet that's the beauty of the profession. It can take on so many different expressions. So some people, when they really meditate on their reason why do I feel drawn to this profession? Well, perhaps it's because they have a high level of intellect and they really desire to educate the public on the nature of criminal activity and how to avoid criminal activity altogether. So that could be one expression. And then someone else really identifies with the true warrior archetype and they want to pursue actively violent criminal offenders. And so perhaps they're drawn towards something like a U.S. Marshal, and their sole purpose is the apprehension of these fugitives, right? And then someone else is drawn to the warrior archetype and they're compelled to move into a SWAT type environment. Someone else is drawn to the leadership and they desire to progress through the ranks and lead other young officers. So it can take on so many different expressions, yet you can see how the expression of each is really going to be unique and will help that officer understand at a deeper level what that purpose might in fact be. And then we see that if they're drawing closer to that purpose, there are so many ways of expressing that purpose that all of a sudden don't have that much to necessarily do with just law enforcement. There might be other ways of expressing, perhaps book, perhaps teaching, perhaps developing a side business in which offers consultation. There's so many vast ways it can be expressed once we draw back away from the sole identity with what we do, and it becomes more about who we are. What's that part of us that we just feel so compelled to express?
Was it hard for you to leave law enforcement?
It was and it wasn't. There's definitely at the time there was certainly some fear because the career of law enforcement or any public safety type sector, whether it be military, firefighting, there's that sense of security in that you've worked so hard to get there. You're kind of in a profession where as long as you remain healthy and safe and morally sound, you can do it for the rest of your career and then retire very comfortably, right? So there's a security element to it. And stepping out and doing some of the work that I'm doing now definitely was a leap of faith. And I'll share a story with you because this is a story I shared when I was speaking with Mark Divine, and it really impacted surprisingly a lot of the listeners. And so maybe there's someone that could benefit from hearing this as well. It was really the death of my mom that kind of woke me up because I was in DEA at the time, and I was enjoying it, but what I really loved to do was teach within DEA the principles that I've now outlined in my book. That's really what God had put on my heart, was to share these principles of creating health of the mind, body, and spirit, which can essentially help anyone in any profession. So that's what I love to do. And I always thought, when I retire, this is what I'll essentially do when I retire. And I always thought I had time. And my mom at the time she was just doing what God called her to do. And she was doing it now in the moment. And what God put on her heart was ministry through the Peace Corps in a very small village in Jordan, of all places. So that's where my mom was when she had this massive stroke due to a brain tumor. And that woke me up from my stupor. And it helped me realize that if God had put something on my heart, God speaks to us now. And so what God had put on my heart, he was desirous of me expressing now. And so in that moment, I woke up from the dream that I had all the time in the world to do what I wanted to do. Now, once I woke up, it doesn't mean I just all of a sudden had a massive amount of courage and the next day made these changes in my life. I was still relatively terrified to make these changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I had written up a resignation letter and was starting to think through the logistics of making this move and how it would look and what I would do. Yet I really lacked the courage to make it happen. And every day I joke, I would drive to work and I would prepare to tell my supervisor, John Barrett, that, hey, sir, I respectfully submit my resignation letter. I just really feel compelled to do something else. And I would chicken out. And then I'd come home for lunch and I'd try to pump myself up during lunch and then drive back to work and I'd chicken out and I'd come home for dinner. That went on for weeks. And then one day, as I came home for lunch, having chickened out that morning, there's a knock at my door and there's a mail delivery from a family friend in Stockton, Jane Cook. That's where I had grown up. Jane was a dear family friend of my mom and dad. And Jane, when she was going through some old pictures of my parents when they were younger, she came across this photo of my mom and dad, and they're smiling into the camera, and they just look so joyful. So I opened up this box from Jane, and there's this framed picture that Jane had sent me and my three younger brothers of my mom and dad. And I'd never seen that photo before in my entire life. And there I am looking at my parents, and they're looking back at me, and it's almost like beyond the grave from heaven. They're just encouraging me the same way they did when they were alive. And that was that final push, or that final sign or straw that I needed from God, from the universe. And I finally just drove back to work and spoke to my supervisor. And what's so interesting is that John said, after your mom died, we were all surprised that you lasted as long as you did. We knew what you really wanted to do. We knew what you loved to do. And we all support you. Go out there and make it happen. We believe in you as well. And it was like, wow, when we really step out there in faith, and when we're on our path, and when we listen to God in our life, we are always supported. It doesn't mean it's easy. The path might still be very challenging, but we are always supported. That's why in the Bible it says God works out everything in a pattern for good. We just have to have faith and we have to trust.
That's quite a story of.
Isn't that neat? Yeah.
So in the book, this is somewhat related to that then as a follow-up. You share a really personal story about this time in your life when you were dealing with your mom's death and the death of your dog, and then a subsequent divorce, that all happened right around the same time, and this
Yeah,
transition out of the DEA into the private sector again, which is just sounds terrifying.
yeah,
But then you're going around the country teaching goal setting and CrossFit and the importance of positive self-talk. And you
yeah.
talk about how that juxtaposition,
Oh man,
and it's
yeah.
an interesting story. But I mean, what first steps did you take to regroup from that? And during any of this time, did you ever deal with, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, the imposter syndrome?
That's a great question, brother. Yeah, so that was, very, very challenging time of my life. Here I was making this leap of faith. And although a moment ago I said that when we make these leaps of faith, we are supported. Yet here I am making this leap of faith. And within a few months, as I'm transitioning simultaneously out of the Army, out of the DEA, my mom passes away. There I am dealing with hospital bills, attorney fees, family estate, trying to keep my three younger brothers and I intact because they are at a much younger stage in life and really challenged by the sudden change of events. My dog dies, and then my wife files for divorce. And I was like, man, my friend Jeff Martone, a
Yeah.
dear friend, CrossFit kettlebell guru, also a true warrior. I'm speaking with Jeff, and he's a believer too. And so I turned to Jeff for spiritual encouragement. And Jeff says something classic. He says, man, Greg, that's a lot of life coming down quickly. Yeah, isn't that great?
Yeah.
And then I spoke to Mark Devine, and he's like, "Oh man, Greg, I bet that hurts like hell." So it's interesting, right? That these two great warriors, these two great leaders, they don't sugarcoat it. They just tell it like it is. It did hurt like hell. There's no trying to deny that, and it was a lot of life coming down quickly. So what I did at that time was I kind of dug into the Bible, and what I found was perhaps a new way of looking at an old Bible verse. At least it was for me. It was very encouraging. And what I read is that my God supplies all I need according to his riches in the glory of Christ Jesus. So the way that I looked at that Bible verse and the way that a lot of my friends who are believers look at that Bible verse is that, well, when things are going good, God is supplying all I need according to his riches. This is great. Things are going good. I'm in God's favor. And then when we're perceiving things as not going well, we're like, what happened? What happened to this Bible verse that is supposed to be of comfort to me? It's not working right now. And what I found is that God's word is always true. That doesn't change, right? And so what I found is that everything works out in a pattern for good. God is, in fact, at all times supplying us with everything that we need, whether we realize we need it or not. And so you think about a parent. A parent provides guidance, discipline, structure, leadership, supervision, boundary for their child. And the child may perceive that in the moment as this isn't what I want. But the parent, in their infinite wisdom, knows that in the long run, this is what the child needs. And that's just a worldly parent. Think about how much greater the wisdom and the understanding, the grace, the mercy of God. And so he is, in fact, always bringing circumstances into our life that we need. All that we need to do on our end is have patience because it's a matter of time. It's always a matter of time. In time, everything begins to make sense, and we see how God really can work everything into a pattern for good. We just have to have patience, and we have to have the ability to discipline ourselves to stay the course, even though the course is going to be challenging. And something else, brother, that's really helpful is if we look at the warrior archetype, what the warrior is able to do better than anyone else in recorded history is develop the ability to have a mindset of positive expectancy. So to change gears here and to share a story, not from the Bible, but from a very, very important part of history when warriors were really developing not just the physical skill, but the mindset. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with the movie The 300 and the famous battle at the gates of Thermopylae.
Hmm.
There's this amazing story that I think really needs to be told and retold in our profession. So a scout went out to conduct a reconnaissance of the enemy force. The scout rushes back to King Leonidas and says, "We have got to retreat. We are so outnumbered that when the enemy archers loose their arrows will block out the sun." To which the king replies, "Good, then we will fight our battle in the shade." Isn't that awesome, brother?
Yes.
And that's what the warrior does. The warrior doesn't try to sugarcoat it. For example, Mark Devine didn't say, "Hey, Greg, this is E. You got this. Hoo-yah," right? He's like, "It hurts like hell." And Jeff Martone says, "That's a lot of life coming down quickly." But we know that we as warriors, we can still make it. We can survive. We can triumph. We've got what it takes to be victorious. Like the King Leonidas said, some battles will be fought in the shade, some in the sun, but nevertheless, the good battle will be fought, right? So to go back to the battle, that's why it says, run the race with endurance, fight the good fight. We can do it.
That's a great story too.
Isn't that awesome,
I
brother?
love
Yeah.
those. It sounds like it's something you'd read in Stephen Pressfield. Um, so transition a little bit. I want to ask you, like, you know, you're at the DEA, you're on the best team, which is like their equivalent of SWAT, right? And your career is definitely looks like, at least from the outside, like you're on an upward trajectory. And I was curious, how did you define success when you were in law enforcement, and how has that changed? And how do you define success now? Is there a difference?
Well, success, happiness, these concepts begin and end in our mind. So someone could have what the world perceives and what they may perceive as happiness on the outside, yet they could be unhappy on the inside.
Hmm.
So happiness, success, growth, accomplishment, these are constructs that are best pursued in our mind and in our heart. Because if we are only pursuing happiness externally, the nature of the pursuit of happiness will in fact lead to unhappiness. Because once we attach to what makes us happy, as I've already explained, if that attachment is in the world is changing. So you attach to something, you have an external goal and you pursue that goal. And if that goal is the sole cause of your happiness and it changes, you become unhappy. So it's best to pursue freedom in our thinking. Because if we're free in our thinking, then we're able to transition much more easily through the ebb and flow of life.
Very nice. I think that makes a lot of sense, and this relates to something you talk about in the book a lot, and you've talked about before, and you talked about it the actually last time you were here, is the importance of positive, tense self-talk, and that's important
Yeah,
to you.
it's so important.
Cops aren't often very positive people. I mean, we survive based on our cynicism, right? We survive because we're cynical that the driver of the car that we're about to approach might pull a gun. So we get through our shift, we get through our career being rewarded for being cynical, and that's sometimes, of course, causes lots of problems. But what are some of your suggestions or tips for developing not just a positive mindset, but just simply positive tense self-talk?
Well, positive self-talk, just like any other skill we're desirous of achieving, needs to be practiced. And the way we practice this is to first develop awareness of the quality of our thinking and the quality of our speaking. Just the same way, if we were doing a workout, we would want to be aware of our range of motion. We want to be aware of our external load that we're moving through space and time. We want to develop awareness. And cops and warriors of all professions should be extremely well versed in this, because one of the things that we have to be keen on at all times is our situational awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we understand this notion. We're trained in this from day one in the academy. All we have to do is further expand that situational awareness to awareness of our thinking and our speaking. So Mark Devine, one of my key mentors who writes the foreword to my book, he talks about this in the analogy form of the dog of fear and the dog of courage.
Sure.
And what he explains is that at all times in our soul, in our heart, we have two dogs that are both desirous of our attention. One dog is the dog of fear. One dog is the dog of courage. And whichever dog we give our attention or awareness to will become stronger in our life. So therefore, it's really important that we are aware, first of all, of which dog we're feeding. That always is the first step, is simple awareness, and then a redirection of our attention and our awareness to the dog of courage. And one of the ways that that can be developed is through the use of a mantra or an affirmation that we simply repeat in our mind to teach our mind the habit that we're desirous of achieving, which is positive self-talk. So again, it's no different than when you learned to do a speed reload, or you learn to draw your weapon from your holster or from concealment. You now are able to perform those tasks with very little conscious thought. It happens at the subconscious automatic level. And thank goodness, because when you need that skill, it's there automatically for you to save your life.
Mm-hmm.
Through practice, we can develop that same habit of mind to frame things in the positive tense. So we think about King Leonidas in that moment. How many repetitions do you think he had of positive self-talk? And so that in the heat of battle, when his 300 men need his inspiration and his leadership, he has it right there, ready. We will fight in the shade. How awesome is that? It was ready to go because he'd practiced it.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Isn't that neat?
So, what do you recommend for that practice? Is it a daily? Do you prefer or encourage meditation or journaling, or is it just a? You talk about first words also in the book. Could those be the same thing? And how does this propagate itself or manifest itself?
Great question. So the action step that I recommend and teach in the book, this has had a profound influence on my life, and the feedback I get on this practice is probably the most positive than anything else that I teach, outside of really encouraging people to develop a closer relationship with God. That's always the biggest feedback is, wow, that changed my life. That alone. And this is probably number two, this idea of first words. And first words and faith can be merged together. So the practice of first words is such that when we wake up in the morning, to simply remain silent. And that silence extends through any means of communication. So we remain silent from speaking. We remain silent from engaging with text or email or Facebook or any type of social media. We remain silent. We move to an area of our home where ideally we kind of reserve that area for this practice. Mm-hmm. And we simply sit for a few moments, bring awareness to our breathing. So mindful breathing is a skill that all disciplines, whether it be a spiritual discipline or a martial discipline, teach. Because if we develop awareness of the breath is our link to the mind, the body, and the spirit, which is always in the present moment. So every breath we take is right now. We can't breathe yesterday. We can't breathe tomorrow. We breathe now.
Hmm.
So just being aware of the breath is a gentle, easy way of just being right here, right now. Then we begin to practice this awareness of thinking. So we simply become aware of the quality of the thoughts that are running through our mind. That's the first step. And the reason that's the first step is that if we are aware of our thinking, we realize, whoa, I'm not actually my thoughts. I'm this awareness of the thought itself, which is a little bit freeing in and of itself.
Hmm.
Then in your mind, you begin to decide what you want to say. And that's that first step of mindful speaking, because mindful speaking begins in the mind, then is projected through the tongue, through the mouth, into the world. So I begin to think in my mind what I'm desirous of saying, which in my case is always Bible verse. Yet it could be anything positive. And then you speak your first words. And the imagery that I like to work with when I teach yoga is it's as if when we wake up in the morning, through that period of silence and mindful breathing, we're creating this stillness. And the imagery could be a still body of water. And then as you speak your first words, it's like you're dropping a pebble into the center of that still body of water, which creates a rippling effect through every corner of your life. And that, as we move through our day, that rippling effect really remains with us. And we're much more likely as we go through our day to continue to be aware of what we're thinking and what we're speaking, because that was the first thing we did in the morning. We practiced. And as we say in the profession, good practice or perfect practice makes perfect. That's how we cultivate these habits that we're desirous of.
Hmm. That's great. And I think it lines up with something I've found success with this year, which for me has been journaling, and just writing down first thoughts in the morning. But after reading the book, want to try more of the self-talk and the that quiet moment before you start before your mind gets away from you.
Yeah, it's amazing. And let me share something else.
Sure.
A book that I highly recommend for your listeners and really everyone in the profession is a book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh yes. Hmm.
This was a very influential book in my life. What Victor teaches us is the same thing Christ was teaching us, and that is that between everything that happens to us, which is our stimulus, the stimulus, and then our response, between stimulus and response, we always have an ability to make a choice. And that choice resides in our mind. And that's why Victor teaches in the book this principle that the last human freedom that we retain is our thinking. We always get to choose what to think about the circumstances of our life. So we can't choose the events of our life, yet we can choose our reaction to them because we retain the ability to choose what we think.
Hmm.
And choosing what we think, that doesn't happen accidentally. That happens through practice. And this practice can begin every day through the practice of first words. That's how we practice. And so, for example, let's imagine you have an athlete who's been practicing in the gym with PVC pipe, a deadlift. They practice with the PVC pipe, and so that over time they can pick up a loaded barbell in the gym. And they continue to practice, and so that if the demands of life call on them, for example, in law enforcement, to move a comrade out of the line of fire, they're going to pick that person up via a deadlift. Yet their ability to do that in duress was developed in the gym with the PVC pipe. So we practice these skills, such as positive self-talk, such as the right use of our language. We practice these just like any other skill. That's the discipline of the warrior, is to practice. And so that when life calls on us to be at our best, we're ready.
Excellent. Greg, I know you only have a couple minutes left. I want to read you an email and then a question that came in that email from a listener because I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay,
So
cool.
I'm going to skip a bunch of my questions and jump to one here from Jason in Australia. It says, Greg, on behalf of the international community, thank you for what you do on a daily basis. I am thankful for your teachings. You have improved my operational fitness and lifestyle through CrossFit Amundson as an international member. I have adopted a morning practice which I have been doing for over 6 months, which has helped me prepare for each day. This was after listening to your last episode on the squad room. Hey, nice plug there, right?
Awesome.
It has improved my mood and clarity during the day. I will be forever grateful. I am currently working through the 30-day Kokoro yoga program with Coach Divine, and I will always class you and Scott McGee as mentors. I have received my copy of Firebreather Fitness in Australia, and I have guided others to your books, especially Your Wife Is Not Your Sister.
Hmm.
It's an amazing gift, isn't it,
Yeah. Wow.
to have such an influence on someone on another continent far away, and to positively affect them like that. I'm just so impressed with that. Anyway, so
Wow. Yeah. Thank you.
one of the questions that he posed was, after 24 years as a police officer, he likes to think of himself as a good motivator at his agency. However, he's often butting heads with fellow sergeants and the higher-ups who drag the chain and are poor role models to others, especially trainees. They set a poor example as police officers and role models to him. Usually these officers have either given up, they're burnt out, they've lost their spark after not getting promoted or other obstacles in their life. He says, I always keep an open mind and support my fellow officers. In some cases, I've tried to motivate and guide these officers, but it is usually on a short-term basis. So his question is, do you have any pearls of wisdom or tips for keeping fellow officers, mostly veterans, motivated and to avoid negativity at the sergeant or above level?
Wow. Well, first of all,
Big question.
yeah, huge question. But first, wow, Jason, brother, if you're listening, I really appreciate that. That's wow. Just I don't know what to say. Thank you. I think the way I would answer that question, because I've experienced that too. It sounds like Jason's a motivator. He wants to be a source of encouragement and a force for positive change in his department. And it can be challenging because not everyone is there. So what we can do is we can look to two unique archetypes. One is the motto of the Army infantry officer I just love. It's this image of a soldier holding an old musket. He's got the musket in one hand. He's looking over his soldier's shoulder, and with his other hand, he's giving the signal for follow me. And we know that the good leader always leads from the front. He's in the very, very front, and he's saying, hey, follow me, which happens to be the same way that Jesus led, right? He went around, he saw prospective disciples, and he said, follow me. So what we learn from these examples is that the best way to lead is by example. So as long as we're always doing our best to set a positive example for others to follow, at least we're planting that seed. At least we're showing them what's possible. And not everyone at any given moment is ready to just drop everything and follow. That's okay. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that we should stop trying. As long as we're trying our best and doing our best and continuing to set a positive example, we may not realize it, but we are making a change. We are making a difference. The seed is being planted, and in time, that seed will cultivate, and that seed will eventually sprout. So my hat's off to you, sir. If you're out there being a force for change and setting a positive example and being an encouragement and a motivator, just have faith in yourself. Have faith that that's the direction God is leading you. And God's going to lead you to those people that need to hear your voice and need to hear your message. And he's going to use you in a profound way, brother. So just keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting the good fight.
I think that's excellent advice. Greg, the book is Firebreather Fitness. Get it on Amazon. You can get it even in Australia. You can get it any of those online retailers. You can get it in bookstores. I think it's a great work. I'm really enjoying going through the workout plan you proposed to, the 21 days of of working out, and you have some sample workouts in there. We'll post links in the show notes for this episode so that people can track that down if they don't know how to use Amazon. And we'll post links to all your socials and everything like that so people can follow you if they aren't already, because they need to be following you. You've had a big influence on this show, on starting this show, and I follow your lead closely, and I'll echo Jason's comments about mentorship and seeing you out there leading that fight, and with positivity has been hugely influential on me. So thank you for that. Thank you again for spending another hour with us. And I hope and wish for nothing but your success with this book and all future projects, and an open invitation to come on and talk about the next one.
Brother, I really appreciate it. Thank you for your leadership as well. You're doing a lot out there, a lot of really positive things. I appreciate you, man. And God bless you, and God bless all the other listeners. And I just pray that this profession that you and I love so much would just continue to flourish, and that people out there would stay sharp, stay strong, and keep fighting the good fight.
All right, there's Greg Amundson again. You're welcome to everybody that emails me, hits me up on socials, and says that I got to get him back on. Been wanting to for a long time. Luckily, this book is a great reason to have him on. Firebreather Fitness is the book. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it in your bookstore. And not surprising that we ran out of time. I had so many other questions I wanted to ask him. He always provides some insight, and he always provides a perspective that is always from a positive and warm place. And I think that's sorely missed just in life right now in general, in society, but especially in law enforcement. And his journey from local cop to federal cop to now not just gym owner, but Krav Maga instructor and yoga instructor, and someone who is really living and seeking the path of the warrior spirit, and an emphasis on that second word of spirit. Someone who's just consistently dedicated to improving himself and others. When he talks about really his calling is to teach, I get it. I totally get it. And I've even attended one of Greg's classes in person and seen his the power of his positivity and light in person, and it's inspiring and it's fascinating. And I do mean it when I say that he's a mentor to me. For notes on this episode, you can go to thesquadroom.net/episode 49, and there's info there, links for the book. If you buy it through the link on our webpage, we get a tiny little kickback from Amazon. And it doesn't raise the price of the book for you, so we appreciate that if you can support the show by going to Amazon through our website, thesquadroom.net. Also, the Squadroom is the Instagram handle and Twitter at the Squadroom. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, insights, things you like about the episode, things you think you've learned from Greg, I'd love to hear them. Garrett, 2 R's, 2 T's at thesquadroom.net. Again, if you want to support the show, you can also support it by going to audibletrial.com/thesquadroom to sign up for a free 30-day audiobook subscription and get a free audiobook of your choice. Glad to be back. We took a little hiatus, unintentional, or I guess it was intentional. It started unintentionally, and episode 48 is all about that. But it's nice to be back in the saddle, back in the quote-unquote professional recording studio, where I get to talk to Greg and some other people. We have a lot of amazing guests already lined up for 2017. A lot of stories to tell, a lot of lessons to learn. So excited for what is ahead, and I highly recommend you go to our website to sign up for our mailing list so that you're clued in on all of the updates as they occur. But until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.